first we're going to have a song, and we'd like all of you to join in on the chorus. Very, you can clap and whatever. One of our members, Howard Switzer, wrote the song and the words and everything. Then we're going to have a 20-minute talk by Joe Bongiovani of the AMI, and he's going to talk about what political economy is, right? And how it relates to the monetary system and debt-free money, okay? And then for 30 minutes, Jamie Walton of the AMI will talk about the AMI's solution to the monetary problem in our country and how we can have debt-free money for everybody. Okay, and then we'll have 25 minutes of questions and answers, which are very important to us. So write your questions down as you listen so you don't forget them. Okay, thanks.
All right. All right. This song goes like this. It goes, money is a debt. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
It is true. It's true. True. Money is how we pay our way. Money is a debt we've got to pay. Money makes us all compete, trying to put shoes on a baby's feet. That kind of money is a banker's scam. Gotta get a new kind of money. A new kind of money. A new kind of money. I heard money don't grow on trees. Gotta get a new kind of money. Cause they lend you the money but not the fee. You must pay religiously. The church used to call it usury. Now they call it setting you free. But sure, you're free to go deep in debt. But gotta get a new kind of money. A new kind of money. A new kind of money. Well, I heard money don't grow on trees. Gotta get a new kind of money. Now, never issue money as a debt. Issue it as a public asset. Issued by an authority elected by democracy. And that kind of money's our sharing the equity. Gotta get a new kind of money. A new kind of money. A new kind of money. Well, I heard money don't grow on trees. Gotta get a new kind of money. Nice.
So that'll. If you want to be
Great. Okay, thanks. How are you? Okay, ran out. Sorry, but thanks for you all for being here, because this is really what it's all about for us for being here at this conference, and us being, the sort of cadre of AMI students. Everybody that's connected with AMI is a student, and if you ever understand what it is that we're talking about here, you're going to be the student to learn a lot of stuff that needs to be brought forward. Now, I want to just say, going from last night when we heard Gar, and in his presentations about how the world is changing, and his enthusiasm, if you will, for besides everything being wrong, that the seeds of change are out there in the world today, and in a way very much unlike and very unique to what's been going on in history, and that is because everything that was kind of real before institutionally, you could say money and finance, which was real before institutionally, we had the crash and that went down, and then you could talk about what has happened with the political process in this country, where everybody was voting against somebody, and we ended up where we are today. And there's been a reaction to that, and the reaction to that has been quite visceral, and based on my experience. And to say that we're not going to accept anymore the way that things were, and he was very, I thought, very wholesome in terms of his observations that he was presenting there. So how does that translate into change? Gar, was good to lay it out and to show how much change needs to be made, but I feel like the real politic of what's going to happen next is up in the air. And that's why we want to talk today about the things that need to happen in order for us to actually implement, to actually accomplish the revolution that Gar sees as possible, and that we see as possible, of course. People who don't know me, my name is Joe Bongiovani. I've been a student of the monetary system for about 40 years. As the Lakota gentleman Iron Eyes said last night, I'm with 74 winters, and so I've been around a long time with my dad drilling it into my head. So this is something that actually needs to be understood at its elementary level, and at its elementary level, as I said earlier, this country was born of political revolution against an imposed private monetary system from the UK. Okay, the colonies had the right to create money. When the UK decided to pass the law that says that they were not going to be able to, colonies were not going to be able to use money to basically to do the things that needed to be done in order to engage in international commerce. Okay, there was a revolt in this country, and it manifested itself in the bloody revolution, and so much blood, sweat, and tears went down onto the lands in that struggle that we really shouldn't let it just let it be done for naught. Okay, well, we did let it be done for naught because we're political, and the states said, well, we're going to have a constitution and we're going to put the money power in our government, just like the colonies had the money power in their government, and then we're going to move forward from that. But unfortunately, history will tell us that it went back and forth between private interests. Alexander Hamilton trying to bring back the same system, and then we move forward to the point where in this country there was a systemic institutional overtaking of the power of the government to create the money when the government abdicated its responsibility and created the Federal Reserve banking system. And ever since then, the Federal Reserve banking system has been creating all of our money. And that's what needs to change. We need to bring back the political power. Money power is the biggest political power there is. Money power is what drives everything in Washington. The money power is what drives everything all over the world, and it's private money power. It's all private money power. So we want to go back to the time, in a way, of the colonies, and that is to say that we as a nation have a sovereign right and a sovereign capacity to have our own money system. And the Need Act is the first bill to come down the pike in the Congress assembled that actually is revolutionary in its essence. At its essence, it is revolutionary because it says we're going to end the private bank's ability to create the nation's money. That's what it says. That's a revolutionary statement. That's a revolutionary undertaking. That's a revolutionary outcome when it becomes successful. Because from that day forward, money will cease to be the master and become the servant of the people to the people's needs. And that's all eminently doable. Okay, it's all eminently doable. Now, some people might say, "Well, we've got a conservative Congress, but the institution itself, okay, the institution itself has to be recognized for all of the. This is the way I always look at it. That for all of the good that wants to come out of each of the conferences of this convention, for all of those goods, there will be competition for money. There will be competition for the ability to accomplish the outcomes, and unless we are distributing money, unless we are creating and spending the money into circulation on the way that the Need Act enables us to do it, okay, we will forever be lined up at the trough to try to figure out who's going, or whether we are going to actually pay for women's health, whether we're going to pay for children's food, nutrition, whether we're going to do whatever it is that's important to each of us. Or we can do it all because it's our money system. And that's the thing that to remember. It's our money system. It's not the banker's money system. It's the people's money system. And we can do it with it whatever we want. And there's never been, in my opinion, a more capable, progressive person in the Congress to understand that. I will say, for at least 50 years, in my opinion, because back in the 30s and the 40s and even into the 50s, there were individuals in Congress, one or two, okay, who knew it. But Dennis Kucinich took it upon himself. We heard last night about the taking over of the public utility, creating the public utility. Hey, Dennis Kucinich did that, 40, 50 years ago, in Cleveland. He went up against, the powers that be. Dennis Kucinich is the greatest of models of how politics should be done. And the author of this book, Stephen Zarlanga, is the greatest example of how to put together what needs to be understood in order for us to be able to make that accomplishment. Because this is a fantastic book. The work that Stephen Zarlanga has done on the monetary system, promoting monetary understanding, it is honest to goodness legendary. And the combination of those two guys getting together, resulted in the NEAT Act, the National Emergency Employment Defense Act. We are saving the ability to employ the people in this country. In other words, you're not going to have the job for the wage so that you can have the benefit of the health insurance once we do this act. Okay? Once this act is law, okay, we're going to be able to fund Medicare for all. And that's the big problem with Medicare for all. Or all of the things that are out there is how do you fund it? And the political economy today, the way it's run, is controlled by the bankers, it's controlled by the moneyed interest. Who pays the lobbyists in Washington? The biggest financiers are who pays the lobbyists in Washington. So this whole thing, this whole system is set up upside down. The few create the money and get the benefit of creating the money, and the many pay the debt to have the money, and they pay the most for it, and they get the least for it. So we need to turn that system upside down. Money has to go first to the public. Money has to go first be spent by the public. And when that happens, public purpose, all the talk about public purpose money, when that happens, the public purpose drives money. Public purpose drives the political and economic outcomes, which is going to be a whole new world. It's going to be a whole new world when the banks are actually looking for depositors to come in and providing services to the depositors at the bank. Instead of you coming in and you're well, can I please have a loan? It's going to be the depositors that are going to be determining the lending policies of the banks, because otherwise they won't have their money in there. And that's going to change. That's going to change even the banking part of it. But the banking part of it is separate from the money part. The money part is the first spending of the money. That's what the kind of international finance overviews call seigniorage, the gain from the money, from the issuing the money. And technically it's supposed to be the difference between the cost of producing the money and how the money enters into the economy. But the reality of it is all of the value of the new money has to begin with the public. So having said that, we've come down to this. We've come down to this point where how are we going to do it? How are we going to be able to accomplish the things that we want to accomplish? And there's never been, a more well thought out and well presented proposal than what is contained in the NEAT Act, what's contained in the National Emergency Employment Defense Act, and it will remain pie in the sky until the people get serious about it. And if we've turned that, and if we're approaching the turn of that corner, and I think we are, then money as a subject, as a topic, as a matter of determining political outcome is going to rise to the place where it needs to be in terms of the national dialogue. The monetary system itself, we need to have the dialogue on the monetary system itself. just on that point, a lot of times we think that it's okay for us to be heading up to the trough and trying to get the dollars that we need to accomplish our, and I don't want to say our pet peeves at all, the things that are important to us, the things that we hold dear to us. It's okay to go somewhere to find the money. And where are you going to? You go to foundations, because foundations get pour money into good public causes. But those good public causes shouldn't have to be going to the foundations. Okay? They shouldn't have to be going to the foundations. They should be funded out of the budget that's approved by the Congress. And everything that we need to do, everything that we want to accomplish, we're able to accomplish. We are able to accomplish if we can accomplish changing the monetary system to one of public issuance, a public money system, rather than a private money system. And in this country, this country was born on public money. Public money served us well in our evolution in terms of believe it or not, I'm going to say that Continental during the Revolutionary War. How did we fund the Revolutionary War? We issued Continental, and that, serving as the medium of exchange, said that we could pay people and they would buy the food, they would do all the things that make the transactions and the economy work. And so we did it with the Continentals, and in the Civil War we did it with the greenbacks. We rose up and said, we're going to issue greenbacks. Greenbacks are publicly issued money without any debt associated with them. Greenbacks are the example of the permanent money system, because when the greenbacks were issued, even though they were fought by the bankers, for 5 or 10 years after they were first issued, once they're permanently in circulation, they continue to serve the economy at that level. They continue to serve the economy at that level. So when we transition to public money, all that money will be permanent money. All that money will stay in the economy. We're not going to have to go to banks in order to be able to borrow more money so that we can have money and have a debt associated with it. Because debt is the thing by which, as Howard said in that song, debt is the thing by which they hold us up and prevent us from accomplishing our objectives. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, who worked greatly on the bill and who knows it, I think, more than almost anybody. And we'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Jamie Walton. As you can probably tell, I'm not from America. I'm from New Zealand. And every time I do one of these things, I have a running battle with my computer. It works for everyone else, and then that doesn't work for me. So I'm just going to see what's going on here. But while my computer tries to wake up,
Do you need a hammer?
one of the well, first of all, like many of you, when I was at what we call primary school in New Zealand, which we call elementary school, what I was taught was that banks lend out savers' deposits to borrowers. And they say they pay the saver 3% interest, they charge the borrower 5% interest, and they make their profit on the 2% margin between that. And that's what my teacher told me then. And then at high school, I did economics at high school, and I was told something different there. I was told that the central bank lends money out to the commercial banks, and then they lend that money out to borrowers. Now, neither of those things is true. So, why is it that we're told these things? It's interesting, isn't it? And another thing I want to So when I was, my background is in civil engineering, and so I was confused by these two different accounts of how the money system works that I was taught at school. And then I came across a magazine which explained how the system actually works in quite a simple little article, and it was by a monetary reformer from the UK called James Robertson, and he's still alive and still active, and he's got his own website. It's very good. He covers a whole range of things: environmental sustainability, social justice, all sorts of things like that. And when I read that, it just sort of blew my mind how unfair that was, that a very small segment of society has been given this huge special privilege to be the creators of the money that we all need to use and need to have to be able to do, live our lives, And it just really blew my mind how unfair that was. That's really something that belongs to society as a whole. Nobody knows who invented the wheel. Nobody knows who invented the lever. But we have, as a society, as a civilization, have used those inventions and many others that have been built upon it for thousands of years. And that all of that work and creativity is our inheritance. It's what we might call our cultural inheritance. Okay, so society as a whole, over time, creates all of the value in our world, the world that we live in, all of the things that we ascribe value to. So that belongs to all of us, really, as a society, as a whole. It doesn't belong to the banks, but the banks have put themselves in a position where they are the arbiters and controllers of what gets valued and what doesn't get valued, what gets done in the economy, what doesn't get done in the economy. So that's, again, that's really unfair. There's nothing that they do that warrants that sort of privilege and power. And it's very undemocratic, of course, and this is a democracy convention, so that's why we're trying to express to people how important it is that money is democratised so that everything else can be democratised. Okay. Well, do you really have a hammer?
I got a heavy shoe though. Yeah.
I'm not sure if anyone knows who invented the hammer.
Does anybody know how to operate that that's in here?
I'm pressing the button. It's not. Hold it down.
Do you have it on your monitor, but it's just not projecting? Is that the problem?
This whole screen is black.
Oh, that's the problem.
Yeah, plug it in, man.
Right, sure.
Somebody go up and give him a hammer.
Yeah, gotta get on the screen.
Try shaking it. Seriously, I've read that. Just gently.
Well, it's.
It needs to be a
I
mover to
thought
shake
that
it.
apples were supposed to be solid state. I thought, no,
No, I've been to the Apple, whatever,
shake
repair
it.
shop.
They told you to shake
Did they charge you?
They didn't, but online people did.
They take it in the back of them.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But I think for a while the shaking did work.
Or make it
One of
better.
the-
Yeah, it made you feel
One of the
better.
things I've learned was
Well, you go ahead with your turn.
there's a power.
It just takes a while to. So, yeah.
One
Now-
thing I heard that there's a power lock that can happen sometimes when you're making connections.
Okay.
And what you
Well,
do is you shut the machine down and you hold the on button in for a long time with it unplugged.
Mm.
And then you plug it back in and try.
Yeah, I did that.
Oh, yes.
It's coming to life. It's just taking time.
All right.
A little apple.
Probably updating the software will be 47 minutes.
Oh, God. Well, while Jamie's doing that, I heard a radio program on my way up here on Tuesday. I was driving up, and on NPR they had a show a host talking to a guest, and the guest was an expert on this new SEC regulation for new corporations coming onto the stock exchange. And in that conversation, the host asked the guest, well, how can government make corporations be better businesses? And the answer the expert gave was, well, they've got to go to the people with the power, the people with the money. I thought, yeah, government has to go to the people with the power, the people with the money. So money is really a very powerful thing, and I was surprised to hear that on NPR. I wished I'd taped it, but this is something that people have to realize, that it's not our government, it's their government.
All right.
Okay.
Woo!
Yeah,
Blue Street.
Alright.
Something for that.
Yay!
All right. Okay, so I've got a lot of slides. I said I wasn't going to have many slides. I was just going to talk off the top of my head because the slides are so distracting. But then I think sometimes pictures, say 1,000 words. So I think it helps to have some pictures and to have something. And if I might just go through some things quickly. But at the end, if there's something that you want to go back to, we can go back to that as part of the Q&A and talk about that thing. Alright, so, money and democracy, that's the title of our workshop. And first thing is that these are both social inventions, and so they belong to society as a whole, like our cultural inheritance of all of the inventions and creativity over the thousands of years. And so they really need to be together. They shouldn't be working against each other. And so, because as Joe mentioned, the profound effect that money power has over political economy, governments can, they can pass laws, but laws can only go so far. What really, when the rubber really hits the road is the money. The money that paid to build the roads, the money that paid for teachers, things like that. You can have a policy. Oh yes, we're going to pay our teachers really well. We're going to have 20 kids per classroom. But if there's no money to do that, it's not going to happen. So, okay, and as was touched on in the previous panel or debate session, and as Joe touched on, I found it ironic that Rohan, the guy from MMT, it was Mark, the guy from public banking, thought that there was a risk of a government money system being fragile. Well, this is what happens under the present system, the private money system. This is from the National Bureau of Economic Research. Looks like a barcode. It's the average time between recessions before the Federal Reserve was established was 7.1 years. And after the Federal Reserve was established, the average was 7.2 years. So it didn't really do much to improve things. But of course it gave a huge safety net to the banks. So, money. For thousands of years there's been this debate about, is money a commodity or is money credit? And sometimes it's credit that's represented by a commodity and vice versa. But then, and this has been going on for at least 6,000 years, but then about 2,500 years ago something happened, and a group of people of society decided that they were going to create a government money. And so that's what it's something distinct. It's not a commodity and it's not credit, because credit in a crisis disappears. Nobody is willing to lend to anybody. Nobody's willing to. It evaporates, basically. What happened with the credit crunch in 2008. Whereas government money, it doesn't go out of existence. It stays there. It stays circulating. Like Joe said, the greenbacks, they stayed circulating. Well, they kept being issued up until 1971. That's from going back to 1864. So it was over 100 years. And then they were only finally retired, I think, in the 1990s sometime, Joe, and sort of taken out of circulation. So here, money is in the middle. Okay, it's something distinct. And it took, and that's what Stephen Zarlenga spent 12 years researching. He researched over 800 books and other documents to come to this conclusion. He started out with some different ideas about money, but he wanted to find out. And so he went to university, studied physics, so he had a sort of a bit of a background in the scientific method, induction rather than deduction, and doing empirical tests rather than conceptual, logical experiments. So he changed his opinion based on the evidence that he found from looking at history. So what he found that he thought that the most accurate, earliest accurate observer of defining money was Aristotle, and he was looking back at the history of this first government money system that happened in Sparta, which was based on a system the Dorian people had developed, and that goes back about 2,600 years, something like that. And so this is what basically is the essence of what Stephen Zarlenga called the science of money. And when you look at it, it is quite a scientific sort of definition. Money is a unit that is, in truth, demand. It's a representative of demand, and it exists not by nature, but by law. And the way he determined that was looking at the system that the Spartans set up, where they decided that they didn't want silver or copper or gold to be the money or the pretense of money, which credits were based on top of that. They wanted something to make a complete break from that system, so that the traders and merchants couldn't have control over it and manipulate it, which they were basically the bankers of that day. So what they did is they had a completely different type of money, and they made it out of iron. And what they did to make sure that it was separate, from commodity, they dipped, when they made these iron lumps, they dipped it in vinegar to make it brittle, so that it was useless as a commodity. It was no good as iron anymore. It was just a token. It was a symbol that was legally determined. This is the money that we're going to accept in society. And then the Romans picked up on this, and this is another good expression by Julius Paulus, who was like a Supreme Court justice, I suppose, of those days. And so money is something that has a legal and permanent value. Again, it's a permanent money. It's not something that can fluctuate in value like credit can, and it's not something that appears and then disappears. Usually appears in a boom time, disappears in a crisis. So it's something that's stable. And so it's what you use to then pay the price for goods. And so, like Joe said, at the time of the American Revolution, it really was about money. It was about the US wanting to be independent from the foreign money power of England, basically. And so whoever wrote this part, they really knew something about money. They may have studied Aristotle and Julius Paulus and those guys, because a lot of those founding fathers were sort of into the classics and that. So this is such a powerful part of the Constitution, and a lot of people sort of overlook it. But there was a Harvard law scholar who, a guy called Robert Nadelson, and he does study of the meaning of this called the coinage clause. So a lot of people think it's just about coins, from the mint. But what he actually determined was, by looking at the usage language at that time and what it was intended to mean, the coin with a lowercase c there is a verb that it means to create or to originate, like to coin a phrase. And this coin here, that's a noun, and that just means one of the currencies. Because at the time of the Constitution, there was all sorts of Spanish dollars and Dutch guilders and British pounds and all sorts of things that were operating as money in the US, because there wasn't much US money at the time. And so, also, it's in the same clause as the weights and measures, which is, measurement science. I come from as well as coming from an engineering background, I come from a measurement science background. So, when I saw that in the US Constitution, I thought, wow, that's so good, because again, it's the science of money coming up again. And it makes it explicit that it's the ability to regulate money and to regulate value. That's a legal thing, and it's a scientific thing as well. So this is the definition after the 12 years and 800 documents. This is the definition that Stephen Zellinger finally concluded in his book. And so apart from whatever it's used to signify, that just basically means it's symbolic. It's a social power. It belongs to society. It's something that's been invented by society, that belongs to society, and it's enshrined in law. And what it is, it's a purchasing power. It's an unconditional means of payment. Okay, there are lots of other means of payment that you can do, like when I was travelling around Australia backpacking, I worked on organic farms, willing work on organic farm, WUFA they call it. And so I was paying in kind, they call it payment in kind, where I would work for half a day in return for board and keep. And that's a form of payment. And there are all sorts of other forms of payment. Barter can be a form of payment. Mutual credit systems can be a form of payment. But they all require some sort of conditions. They require some sort of prior agreement, and they require some contractual obligations that need to be satisfied, and they usually require some consideration of what is the payment that needs to be specified. Whereas if you've got some money in your pocket or on your debit card or whatever, you can go down to the shop, buy something, that's it. There's nothing else that needed to be arranged beforehand. There's nothing else that needs to be done afterwards. That's it, the payment, that's final settlement. So that's what makes money different from other forms of payment. It's unconditional. Okay, so what the Need Act does, it was introduced by Dennis Kucinich, as Joe mentioned, and as he said, it's really the first time in the whole 225 years between 1776 and 2011 that something that really nailed it had been introduced as a law. And really, for the first time, it really defines money in law as well, as an unconditional means of payment. So the ethos behind it, just the minimum things that are necessary to achieve the start of the results that we want to see, okay? Sure, there might be all sorts of nice things that we want to do, but the more things you try to ask for, possibly, the more difficult it becomes. So what is the really minimum things that we need to do to make the change that we need for this revolution, like Joe and Gar and Nat talking about, and other people here are talking about. And also, to make it easy and acceptable, has to be non-disruptive. So it is non-disruptive, and I'll explain that in a bit. And the ultimate aim is to achieve justice, because without justice, we can't have any peace, we can't have any security. We have unstable lives. Apart from an unstable economy, we have unstable lives. And it's ready to go now. It's on the shelf. Any other congressperson can introduce it and get a co-sponsor or whatever. Of course, that's going to be a big task, but with some people power, things can happen. You know, say 200 years ago, a lot of people would have agreed, oh yes, you know, slavery, chattel slavery is terrible, but it's just the way things are, and, you know, it's always been that way, and there's nothing we can do about it, but, you know, that changed. And then, you know, 150 years ago, people were thought, oh, women's suffrage and women's equality, oh yes, well, I mean, really that should be done, but, oh, it's just the way things are, and you can't do anything about it, but that was changed. So, you know, things can change when enough, and not that many people, but when enough people really focus on it and get it done. And because it's all electronic now, all our money originates as digital bits and bytes, and hopefully I have a better computer than mine, it can be changed over in a millisecond, so, you know, the speed of light. So, what the NEED Act does for you personally is that it makes the money in your bank account actually your money, because at the moment, your bank account balance legally is, from case law, is treated as an unsecured loan that you've made to the bank, which is a bit scary. And that's why, you know, some of the bank resolutions, you know, after the 2008 crisis, one of the things they've got is what they call a bail-in, where basically the banks will take 10% of your bank account balance and just cut it out. That's what they tried to do in Cyprus. And a lot of people protested, and so they didn't do it to the people who didn't have much money, they only did it to people that had over a certain amount of money. But I think that's part of the Fed's current bank resolution process, is to take a percentage of all of your bank accounts. So with the NEED Act, that would never happen, because your money would be in custodial safekeeping accounts. It would be like an electronic safety deposit box. Okay, it's got nothing to do with the bank's lending and business. It'll be a separate thing that they do, like they look after people's jewellery and bits and pieces, and look after people's securities and stuff, which is all electronic as well these days. Not jewellery, but securities are. So they know how to do it, and even if the bank failed, they're not allowed to go and sell the stuff in their safety deposit boxes. You know, that would be outright theft and fraud, and they'd go to jail. They definitely go to jail for that. So what it does is it eliminates the moral hazard of banks, of the governments having to prop up the banks to keep the payment system going and to stop everybody from losing their money and there being no money in the economy. And so that's why the governments always have to yield to the demands of the bankers, saying, you know, if you don't bail us out with $700 billion within 3 days, it'll be martial law, because the supermarkets won't be able to pay for the deliveries to the stores, and there'll be food riots and all that. You know, so with the NEED Act, there'd never be that threat. The banks could never make that threat on the government, which they did in 2008. And what it does for society is that it makes all US dollars an asset to the holder and a liability to nobody, which is what US coins are now. That's the way they treat it in the accounting. And so this eliminates the rentier from the economy, which is basically the banking system renting. You know, as Joe said, from what Robert Hemphill, the credit manager at the Atlanta Fed Bank, said, we have to borrow every dollar, you know, cash or coin, currency or credit, from the banks. You know, because nobody issues, banks don't issue loans of cash usually, and the government doesn't make payments in cash. So to get cash, you have to go to an ATM, you have to actually have had a bank deposit. Somebody has to have gone into debt to a bank or sold something to a bank for there to be a bank deposit, for you to have got a bank deposit, for you to be able to get cash out of the ATM. Okay, so it all originates with banks creating deposits these days. Okay, so how does the Federal Reserve treat Treasury coin? Well, they call it Treasury currency, and there is a liability there. What that liability represents is the cost of producing coins. Okay, so some of the coins are nearly or even more expensive than their face value these days because the cost of metal has gone up and the cost of manufacturing all that. But the cost of making paper money is much less. It's like 10 cents for $100, and the cost of making electronic money is basically nothing. It's virtually costless. So this is the legal value of that treasury currency, treasury coin. And the Fed doesn't know. The Fed's system, like economists, they think that money has to be, they've got this construct where they think that money has to be a debt like any other financial asset. It has to be somebody else's liability. But that's not the case with treasury coin. The face value is more than the cost or the liability of it. So they call that a discrepancy, an instrument discrepancy. And our aim is to make what the NEDAC would do is to make the whole money supply a discrepancy, because it'll be an asset to the holder and a liability to nobody else. And that's okay, they can still record it as a discrepancy if they want to. It's a good discrepancy to have, I contend. And so this is what the Treasury says. The Mint is a bureau of the Treasury. This is the seigniorage that Joe was talking about. And it adds to the government's cash balance, but it doesn't involve taking anything from anyone else. It doesn't involve taking money from anyone else. Okay, this is originating new money. It's not taking somebody else's pre-existing money. It's not taking somebody's land or anything like that. It's not confiscating anything from anybody. This is creating new purchasing power in the economy. And it's an exercise of the government's sovereign power to create money. So the Treasury knows that it has this power. It just doesn't really use it. And this is the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board. These are like the top accountants in the country that determine the way that the federal government does it. The whole of the federal government has to do all of its accounts to make everything consistent. And so they recognise there must be some accountants who understand about money as well, like the founding fathers way back when they wrote the Constitution. Throughout human history, there's always been this people that have been keeping the flame alive. And there's been a lot of people trying to put that flame out, but somehow the flame has kept being passed down from generation to generation. And so what this does, again, it's the sovereign power of the government to directly create money, and it's not an inflow of resources from the public or from anywhere else, but it increases the government's net position. So that means it has to be a net asset because it's added to the asset side of the balance sheet, has not added to the liability side of the balance sheet. So the difference is what in government accounting speak they call net position, and what normal business accounting you'd call capital or equity. Okay, so this is what's happened. The government's cash balance has increased, and the government's equity or net position has increased. Sue, do you have a
5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Would you go back to that one and explain that again?
Okay, well, I was umming and ahhing about whether to put balance sheets in here, because before about 5 years ago, even though I've been studying money, the whole history of money and money reform literature and all that, I hadn't studied any accounting. I didn't do any accounting at school. I I have to admit that I didn't understand what a balance sheet was. I've never been involved in business or anything, but it's really not that difficult. It's like anybody who's been involved in doing bookkeeping or anything like that is. This is the money you've got available to spend. This is other assets, could be machinery, it could be land, whatever. This is usually financial obligations to pay somebody else, like a debt. And the difference is what's left over. That's like your net worth. So what's the money supply would be under the Need Act would be the net worth, which in reality is reflected by the value that we put onto all the things that we buy. You know, all of the roads and the schools and the laptop computers and these values rapidly depreciating. And yeah, that sort of thing. Okay, so we had an economist from the International Monetary Fund come to a few of our conferences, and you know, as most economists are, he was initially sceptical, but he kept coming back year after year, and eventually, had an epiphany, I suppose we say. He had a monetary epiphany, and so then he wrote a paper for the IMF, a working paper called the Chicago Plan Revisited, and I really love the language that he uses. By the way, before he wrote that paper, he read this book 3 times. He really studied it in great detail, and he checked all the references and all that, you know. And then he really got it. So he says, money, therefore, is properly treated as government equity rather than government debt. And that's exactly how Treasury coin is currently treated under US counter-conventions. And government issued money represents equity in the Commonwealth. I love that phrase because the idea of Commonwealth and the Commons is what I was saying at the beginning, that all of the values that we've created throughout our history is something that belongs to all of us. It's part of the Commons, it's part of our cultural inheritance. It belongs to all of us. And equity in the Commonwealth means that we've all got a stake in it. We're all stakeholders in it. You know, nobody is excluded from it. Everybody has a right to it. It's a human right. And it's the central liquid asset. It's the permanent money that allows things to carry on being transacted, even if trade credit and contra trades between businesses, even if they stop trusting each other, they'll still be able to use the money to make payments and transactions, and the economy will still be able to function. Now there's 2 at once. Okay, so this is the 3 key elements of the Need Act. And like Joe mentioned, this is like his dad, how many years ago, Joe? 40, 50 years ago, he worked out the same thing.
Yeah.
And basically, most monetary reformers have worked on this for years and years, but they basically come to the same conclusions. And one thing is to put the Fed into the Treasury. That's where the Mint and the Bureau of Engraving and Printing are already. So they create the coins and the currency, and so the digital money would be also under one roof. And so it's all consistent. And monetary policy be truly accountable to Congress, because at the moment the Federal Reserve it deals on a commercial basis with the banks that it's supposed to regulate. You know, isn't that an obvious conflict of interest? You know, they're gonna want to prop up the banks that they're dealing with because they've got a commercial interest to keep their loan repayments and that going like anybody else that's in business. You know, it's a conflict of interest. Okay, so another thing is to stop banks creating money, and there's an easy way to do that, and that's tied in with making your money your money by putting it into custodial accounts, and then you a growing economy still needs more money added to it. As the population grows, as more economic activity happens, and so on. So we need to create new money, and so the best way to do it is to do what the Constitution says the federal government was set up to do, which is to promote the general welfare. And so one way of doing that is public infrastructure, other ways public education, all those things that really everybody uses, everybody gets some benefit from, both individually and collectively. So the government principle is to neither be inflationary nor deflationary, and for there to be sufficient money to allow goods and services to trade freely. And I'll come back to this because we've got to go through quickly. Okay, so the monetary authority is independent. It instructs other bureaus of the Treasury that are responsible for the different types of money, digital, paper, and metal, how much to do and how to issue it. But it itself doesn't. It's got no interest. It doesn't hold or handle any money itself. So it's got no profit motive. It's got like the Federal Reserve at the moment. It does have a profit motive because part of what it has to do is it has to pay dividends to its bank shareholders every year. It has to pay a 6% dividend on the amount of stock that they have paid up for. So it's got to make a profit. So, again, there's a conflict of interest between being a regulator and being in business, But monetary authority wouldn't have that. It's not involved in the budget process, it just gets paid out of the Treasury's budget. It's part of the Treasury, like the IRS is paid for out of the Treasury budget. And it doesn't deal with banks, so there's no conflict of interest. And it's going to be getting all this information, which the Treasury and the Federal Reserve System, they're already collecting all this data, And so there's a huge amount of information they can collect about what's happening in the economy, and they do all this now. Just at the moment, their monetary policy is completely useless because the interest rate that they charge to banks for borrowing reserves is actually less than the amount of money interest they're paying on the reserves. So, it's totally ineffective. Okay, so be able to collect all this information, work out, and make adjustments regularly, which the Federal Reserve System does at the moment with their beige book and blue book and all the other coloured books that they produce. But again, it's all for nothing because whatever the Fed decides, it's got no real effect in the economy. They pretend that it does, it's like a what is it? It's like some sort of voodoo ritual or something where they make believe that whatever they say has got some. It's like an oracle from Delphi or something, reading the tea leaves or something, and reading the entrails of animals or something, and saying, "Oh, this is what's going to happen." It's basically all they're doing. So, if there's too little money being produced below what the demand for money is, that'll be picked up with deflation. There'll start to be less economic activity, less money compared to what goods and services there are, so the prices will go down. If it goes above the potential and capacity of the economy, then they'll be indicated by inflation. There's quite a wide band there, so it should be reasonably easy for the monetary authority to stay within those upper and lower bounds. And of course, it's all based on society, our ability to produce things. That's what the real capital of our society is. It's not money per se. And it's not. It's really our. Some people describe it as our culture. It's the accumulation of all of our knowledge, and it's our know-how to how to do things, and it's all of the gifts of nature that we've got and know how to use to do things that we want to make our lives better.
You might say simply it's backed by the average productivity of the people whose name it bears.
yeah, it's
over time.
yeah. I mean, if you didn't have that ability to produce, then the money would be meaningless. You know, if there was nothing to buy with it, it wouldn't have any use. Okay, so the overall effect, it's stable. Again, Michael Kumhoff, he did another paper. He now works at the Bank of England, in the research hub there at the Bank of England. And he wrote a paper 2 years ago, 2015, called Banks Are Not Intermediaries and Why This Matters. Because 99.9% of economists believe in this story that banks take savers' deposits and lend them out to borrowers, which is the same as what I was taught at elementary school. And 99.9% of economists believe that in their models, although they are taught in their first year that that's not really what happens, but then they're taught the second story that I was told, which is that the central bank lends money to the banks and the banks then on lend that to borrowers. So they're confused, and both of the things that they think, the two contradictory things that they think at the same time, are both wrong. So it's like double wrong think. If you know 1984 George Orwell double think, holding two conflicting views at the same time, well, they do that, and they're both wrong views. So.
Jamie, you should finish up so we have time for questions.
Okay. Well, I'll just go through to the end. Okay. Well, and then we are going to do another session tomorrow with Reverend Delman Coates, who's going to be talking about, it's in the oppression track, and it's about how monetary reform is like the new emancipation. We've got rid of chattel slavery, we haven't really got rid of wage slavery, and actually, even worse than wage slavery, the International Labour Organization, I think, put out a report just recently saying that there's more slavery in the world now than there's ever existed in human history before. There are so many people that are being basically abducted from one country, transported to other countries, having their passports taken off them, being beaten up, having people dress up as policemen and saying that they don't care, you can't go to the police, and basically being exploited, working for free, right alongside other people, and nobody even knows about it. There's a group in the UK called Unseen UK who've looked into this, and it's rife, and it's the same thing's happening in New Zealand. I'm sure it's probably happening here as well. So, basically creates over 50 million good-paying jobs, and I was going to explain how we get to that, but there's going to be a new engineers report out this year, so I'll have to, when they work out what the infrastructure deficit is for this year, it's getting about a D- rating. There's so many bridges that are at risk of structurally falling apart. There's so much work that needs to be done, okay? And the only thing that's lacking is the money, which is ridiculous because all it is bits and bytes on the computer. It's totally insane that that's holding us back. So I'll leave it there and look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
So 1, 2, 3. First, second.
So if deposits are custodial accounts by banks, banks would then only lend investment accounts, I'm assuming, or people would put money in banks to invest.
Yes.
So if that money is not enough to support the private market, would then the U.S. Treasury loan or give to commercial banks?
Loan.
Spend into circulation.
Well, additional money could be spent in circulation, which then could, if some people had a surplus, that they'd be able to invest it.
But I'm saying, well,
yes.
So let's put it this way: if a bank we have this big boom of economic growth, and some chain, whatever chain, let's just say Applebee's, for lack of a better term, wants to expand because people are going to restaurants and whatever. They go to their lender, and the lender does not have enough money in its investment accounts to fund their operations and their expansion. The U.S. Treasury would then loan the bank
Yes,
the money needed to
yes,
cover that shortfall.
yes. Yeah, that's covered in the NEED Act. They would be able to draw on funds from the revolving fund, which is established.
And would that be at interest, or would that be?
At interest. But the interest could be negative. If it was something that they really wanted to be done, like they really wanted to promote recycling renewable materials
Solar
like
power,
glass.
solar
Power, it could be a negative interest rate, which is effectively a subsidy. But if it serves a public purpose, it's a political decision. You know?
I just want to do.
So normally, because this is one of the things that often comes up, unlike my slides, is how would banks be able to make loans if they couldn't create the money? Well, there are other financial institutions that make loans without creating money. Finance companies, investment trusts, mutual funds. They make loans and investments without creating any money. They have to actually receive money before they can lend it on. So all we're doing is putting banks on the same level playing field with all of these other financial institutions that they compete with, and basically making them operate like any other business has to. You know, a hardware store can't just create hammers out of thin air, can it? So these are where banks would be able to get the funds from. There's about $7 or $8 trillion of savings and time deposits, which at the moment, under the present system, don't do anything. They're just dead money. They're just parked on banks' balance sheets. Those deposits are never lent to any borrowers, because that's not the way the bank system works. They're just checking account money that's been deactivated and parked into a savings account or a time deposit. And banks want to do that because that means that that's some reserves that they don't have to pay out to other banks when their customers make payments to other banks. So that's why they like to hold those. But there's part of the NEED Act, it pays off all the government debt, all the treasuries, all of the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and all that, and all of the state and local government debts as well would be able to be redeemed. And the portion of those securities that are held by banks, when they receive the money, what are they going to do with it? They're not going to want to put it in a checking deposit, because under the NEED Act, checking deposits would actually incur a fee. So that encourages people to either invest or spend the money, keep it moving. And that's the way that banks can make some income as well, instead of charging interest and paying interest on accounts. So they're going to want to invest it themselves, the money that they receive on redeemed securities. They've also got their own funds that they've amassed. They get to keep all the reserves that they have at the Reserve Bank and that they have at other bank accounts. Banks hold money at their account at the Federal Reserve, but they also hold money with accounts they have with other banks. Okay, so that's their own funds. They get to keep that. So again, they're not going to want to keep that in a checking account and paying fees on it. They're going to want to earn some income on it, so they're going to want to lend that. Then there's the revolving fund. That if all of this, which is about it's about $10 or $12 trillion, if that's not enough, which I think it would be way more than enough. Actually, I think that the banks would have to put funds into the Fed's. The Fed has a term deposit facility where they basically absorb excess funds. And the Fed could keep doing that, and those funds could go into the revolving fund to be used for public purposes, and then, pay back to the banks later. Then there's, if all that's not enough, the Monetary Authority can say, well, we need some more money. We've built all the roads, we've built all the airports, so we'll create some more money and we'll temporarily lend it to the banks until we need a new road to be built or a new school to be built or whatever. So there's really no problem with banks being able to make loans.
Great, thanks so much for your talk. On the sort of a foundational understanding of what money is, how it's imagined currently, and the importance of making that sort of application shifting more towards public control of what money is and how it's used. And I just have a question about the NEED Act specifically. It's sort of the political context. You said that it came about in 2011. I'm coming to this conference with, knowledge of the amendment push for, people to say, money isn't speech, corporations aren't people, and I'm wondering how much of. Yeah, I'm with American Promise. We're doing similar work as them, but you said the Need Act of many things will define money as a means of payment, and I'm wondering how much of that's pushed back to its current constitutional equation with speech.
Well, you're talking about the Citizens United,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, I mean, that's something that happened sort of regardless of the money system. I mean, it happened under the present money system. And part of the dynamics of this debt-based money system is that it tends to accumulate in a few hands.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas Piketty's analysis, he looked back through hundreds of years of archives and records, and he found that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer relatively, because if the rate of return on investments is higher than the average growth of the economy as a whole, then the rich who have made those investments are collecting more than they contribute, because you can only buy so many TV sets and cars and stuff.
Right.
Like that guy in the townhouse says, he's a millionaire and he only buys a couple of pairs of jeans and sneakers, and what does he do with the rest of it? He invests it and accumulates more and more and more. So what the Need Act, in a way, it makes a clean break from that at source. That the money in the first place does not have to be borrowed into existence, and then what banks do is they basically accumulate money by collecting interest, and they do pay some out. They pay interest out on deposits, they pay interest, they pay dividends out to shareholders, and they pay their staff and all that out of the interest they collect, but they still retained earnings which accumulate, which becomes part of their capital, which then the current rules they're encouraged to do, because that's the basis they're enabled to create more credit. So at the moment, the whole system is geared towards that accumulation. Okay, we cannot. This bill is not about taking money from rich people and giving it to poor people. If we wanted to pass a law like that, that's another sort of law. This is a law to fix the money system as it is. Then, if you want another law to do those sorts of things, that's another law. And I think that Citizens United thing, that should just be overturned. I mean, that's just a ridiculous. It's just a ridiculous thing. And this corporate preserve. But that's getting beyond the scope of this. This is just a law to fix the money system, not the whole political system. Obviously, we need more people participating in politics. We need more electoral reform. We need voting reform, all sorts of things like that.
There's a third question here and a fourth, and that's probably it. Are there any other questions?
So instead of government having debt, there would be called equity. And today, we
Yeah.
have trillions of dollars worth of debt. If I own a treasury note, they're paying me some little interest on that. But if that then gets declared equity, what happens to the trillions of dollars that is owed to somebody?
Yeah.
They got to get paid. There's
Oh yes.
huge
Okay.
amount.
Right.
I can see if you start at the beginning of this work, but we got a big problem.
It's paid off.
It's
paid off.
It's coming. It's clear. Okay.
It's paid off.
All right. So, okay, I'm going to go back a bit more. There's no question I can't answer. It's just that my computer won't play. Okay.
Quick answer is it's paid off.
Oh yeah. I'll just go this way. Okay. All right. So, equity bailment. Now, your money will become bailment. I didn't know that word. We had asked professors of accounting, what is this thing that we're trying to do? And they said they couldn't help us. But luckily, the lawyers in the Legislative Council at the House of Representatives and the legal counsel in Congressman Singer's office, they knew about bailment. So, and really, what it means is like self-storage garage. Like you put your furniture in there, you've transferred possession of the furniture to the self-storage garage, but you haven't transferred ownership of it. It's still your furniture, and they're looking after it for you. And they have to insure their premises to make sure that they've got security alarms and all that. So they have to make sure that it's safe because they've agreed to keep it safe for you. So that's part of the deal. So what happens? This is the accounting change. This is what stops banks being able to create money, and it's what makes the money actually your money. These deposit liabilities here. It's a legal process called subrogation. It's basically if you've got third-party car insurance and you hit somebody else's car, basically your insurance company takes responsibility to pay their insurance company to pay them. And so basically the same thing happens. The money is put down here as custodial items, and that's part of memorandum items. It's not on the bank's business part of the balance sheet. It's their safekeeping accounts. It's like the safety deposit boxes.
Yeah, I think that's the question.
I know, but I've got.
Get to the fourth question. Your money gets sent back. When it
So
comes
now-
to, they'll keep paying you interest until that bond is retired.
Yeah.
That's basically that.
If we didn't replace that liability there, that would be a huge windfall for the banks, equivalent to the whole money supply, and eventually they'd still have all this money owed to them, so eventually they'd end up with all the money. So instead of that happening, they have to pass it through to the Treasury to revolving fund. They still keep the interest. This principal goes into a revolving fund. It then gets recycled. It can be used initially for a citizen, one-off citizen's dividend. It can be then it'll keep flowing back to the banks as people paying off their bank loans. When they get more money, they want to pay off their debts really quickly. Especially credit cards at 30% interest or whatever. So the money will then go back to the revolving fund, and it can be used to redeem treasuries. Okay, and then what are people going to do with that money which they've invested in treasuries? And our government's not issuing treasuries, and state and municipal governments aren't issuing munis anymore. They're going to have to invest in the private sector. They're going to have to invest in IBM. They're going to have to invest in Microsoft, Apple. They're going to have to invest in
Local food production.
local food production. They're going to have to invest in solar. They're going to have to invest in recycling. They're going to have to invest in all of the new technologies that need money so that we can decarbonise our environment, so that we can breathe air.
Or invest in banks, so they have money to loan.
Basically, bank bonds will replace Treasury securities as the most, as like the highest rate of security. Which already German bonds, they have a AAA plus rated bond, which even central banks use as part of their capital.
John, did you have a question, John? 'Cause we are out of time.
Right, I think it's time to quit because I pass.
The only thing I want to say, because I thought I understood the gentleman's question was to be that, there's a liability, the government is paying interest to me, I'm a holder of the bond, and now you're saying, the government's going to pay that off, it's going to become equity. What happens to me? What happens to me as the holder of the bond?
Yeah.
And I think the answer is, you get your money back.
Yeah, you'll get your money, and then you can invest in something else, which will probably yield higher than treasuries. Most corporate bonds yield higher than treasuries.
What is your interest?
The point is that the money then is put to good use, and if there are no more good uses, we don't need more money, it can be taxed out of existence so that the prices don't increase. The point is to keep prices stable.
Yeah.
And a secondary purpose of taxation, the primary purpose will be simply to pay the work of government, not to create money, but you pay the work of government. The second purpose is to tax it out of existence. If there's way, way, way too much money, then prices would inflate. But there's plenty of purpose before that.
The UN reckons that the world's population is going to start declining after about 2050. And we've already reached peak child. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this expansionary credit money system is going to work when there's a declining population and a declining
Just want to announce there is a money education and money educators and schooling session this afternoon at 2:30. There's an environment one tomorrow at the same time,
Yeah.
2:30. And there's one that was mentioned already at 10:30, I believe, on oppression and money.
I think that's the Saturday.
That's Friday.
Is
Tomorrow
that Friday
morning.
morning?
And stop by the AMI page, we have lots of material.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Coming, everyone.